The train whistle screamed through the Nevada desert as Jessica Thornton pressed her trembling hand against the cold window glass, watching her reflection blur with unshed tears while the conductor announced they would reach Boston in 4 more days where her future husband awaited, a wealthy merchant of 42 years who had purchased her hand through correspondence with her desperate father. Jessica was 21 years old, and until 3 months ago she had believed her life in Columbia, California would follow a different path. Her father's gold mining operation had collapsed after a cave-in killed 3 workers and buried his dreams beneath tons of worthless rock. The debts had piled higher than the Sierra Nevada peaks surrounding their small town, and when Gregory Ashford's letter arrived offering marriage and financial salvation, her father had signed away her future without meeting her eyes. She had never seen a photograph of the man, knew only that he owned textile mills, and expected a young, obedient wife to manage his household and bear his children. The rail car rocked gently as it crossed into Utah territory on that scorching August afternoon in 1873. Jessica shared her compartment with 2 other women, both considerably older, who had clucked their tongues sympathetically when she first boarded in Sacramento but now dozed in the afternoon heat. Her trunk sat in the luggage car filled with the modest trousseau her mother had sewn with shaking hands and wet cheeks. Everything she owned in the world was on this train, carrying her toward a life she did not want with a man she could never love. The whistle sounded again, this time accompanied by the grinding shriek of brakes being applied with sudden violence. Jessica lurched forward, catching herself against the seat back as the train began to slow much faster than normal. The other passengers stirred, confusion rippling through the car as men stood and women clutched their handbags. Through the window, Jessica could see nothing but endless scrubland dotted with sagebrush and the occasional twisted juniper. "What is happening?" one of the older women asked, her voice thin with worry. Before anyone could answer, a gunshot cracked through the air. Then another. Screams erupted throughout the car as the train continued its grinding deceleration. Jessica's heart hammered against her ribs as she heard shouting from outside, men's voices raised in commands she could not quite make out. Train robberies were common enough in these territories. Everyone knew the stories, but knowing and experiencing were entirely different matters. The train shuddered to a complete stop, and for a moment there was only the hiss of steam and the frightened murmurs of passengers. Then boots thundered on the platform between cars, and the door to their compartment burst open. A man stood silhouetted against the bright desert light, tall and broad-shouldered, a bandana covering the lower half of his face and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes. He held a revolver in one hand, but kept it pointed at the ceiling rather than at the terrified passengers. "Nobody moves and nobody gets hurt," he said, his voice rough but steady. "We are not here for your money or your valuables. We are looking for someone specific." His eyes swept the car, and Jessica felt her breath catch when his gaze landed on her. Even with most of his face covered, she could see his eyes were a startling blue, bright as the summer sky outside. He moved toward her with purposeful strides, and the other passengers shrank back as he approached. "Jessica Thornton?" he asked, and shock rippled through her that this stranger knew her name. "I am she," Jessica managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want with me?" "To save you from making the biggest mistake of your life," he said, and held out his hand. "You're coming with me?" "Absolutely not," Jessica said, finding her voice despite the fear coursing through her veins. "I do not know who you are or what you think you are doing, but I am traveling to Boston to meet my intended husband." "Your intended husband is a monster," the cowboy said flatly. "Gregory Ashford has buried 2 wives already, both dead under suspicious circumstances. You would be the 3rd. Now you can come with me willingly or I can carry you, but either way you are not staying on this train." The elderly woman beside Jessica gasped, clutching at her arm. "Do as he says, dear. Better a live outlaw than a dead bride." Jessica stared at the cowboy, her mind reeling. Could it be true? Her father had been so desperate for the money. He had asked no questions about Ashford beyond his bank statements. But how would this stranger know such things? And why would he stop a train in the middle of the Utah desert to tell her? "Why should I believe you?" she asked. "You have given me no reason to trust you over my father's arrangement." The cowboy lowered his bandana, revealing a strong jaw covered in several days of stubble, and a mouth set in a grim line. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 28 or 30, with a face weathered by sun and wind, but undeniably handsome. "Because I knew your mother," he said quietly. "Margaret Thornton. God rest her soul. She died 6 months ago, and before she passed, she wrote to my mother begging for help. She knew what kind of man your father was trying to sell you to, but she was too sick to stop it. So she asked my mother to stop it instead." Jessica felt tears spring to her eyes at the mention of her mother. The consumption had taken her quickly, far too quickly, leaving Jessica alone with a father who had grown cold and distant in his grief and financial ruin. "How did you know my mother?" she whispered. "Our families were friends long ago before your father found gold and moved away from Nevada," the cowboy said. "My name is Benjamin Hayes. My mother and yours grew up together in Carson City. When your mother wrote that letter, my mother was already dying herself. She passed 2 weeks after your mother did. But before she went, she made me promise I would stop this wedding. So here I am, keeping that promise." The sincerity in his voice cut through Jessica's fear and confusion. She looked at his outstretched hand, calloused and strong, offering her an escape she had not dared to dream possible. Behind him, she could hear more shouting from outside, other male voices calling out that they needed to move soon before any lawmen came investigating. "If I go with you, where will we go?" Jessica asked. "My father has already spent the advance money Ashford sent. If I do not marry him, my father will be ruined." "Your father ruined himself," Benjamin said harshly, "and he had no right to drag you down with him. As for where we will go, I have a ranch outside Elko. It is not much, but it is honest work and honest land. You will be safe there while we figure out what comes next." Jessica looked around the car at the frightened faces of the other passengers, then back at Benjamin Hayes with his impossible offer of rescue. Everything in her life had been decided by other people. First her father, then this distant husband she had never met. Here was a choice, the first real choice she had been given in months. It terrified her almost as much as the prospect of marrying Gregory Ashford. "How do I know you are not simply another man looking to control my fate?" she asked, needing to understand his motives before she put her life in his hands. Benjamin met her eyes steadily. "You do not know," he admitted. "You have only my word. And I know that is not worth much from a stranger holding a gun who just stopped your train. But I swear on my mother's grave that I mean you no harm. You will have your own room in my house, and if after a week or a month you decide you want to return east or go anywhere else, I will help you get there. I am offering you time to think, not another cage." Something in his eyes convinced her. Some fundamental honesty she had not seen in her father's face for months. Jessica took a deep breath and placed her hand in his. "Then I suppose I am trusting you, Benjamin Hayes." Relief flooded his features, and his fingers closed gently around hers. "Thank you. Now we need to move quickly. Do you have luggage?" "A trunk in the luggage car." "We will get it. Come on." He kept hold of her hand as he led her down the aisle toward the door, his gun now holstered at his hip. As they stepped out onto the platform between cars, Jessica was struck by the blast of dry heat and brilliant sunlight. 2 other men sat on horseback beside the train, both armed and watching the windows for any signs of resistance. One of them held the reins of 2 additional horses, including a smaller mare that Benjamin guided Jessica toward. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Yes, though it has been some time." "Good enough. We need to put distance between us and this train before they reach the next station and telegraph ahead." He moved toward the luggage car where another member of his gang had already forced open the door and was searching through the trunks. "Which one is yours?" Jessica pointed to a modest brown trunk with brass corners, and Benjamin grabbed it easily, securing it behind his saddle with practiced efficiency. Then he turned back to her, and before she could protest, placed his hands around her waist and lifted her smoothly onto the mare. The casual strength of the gesture sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach. "Hold tight," he said, swinging up onto his own horse, a tall buckskin gelding. "We have about 20 miles to cover before sunset." With a whistle and a gesture, Benjamin spurred his horse forward, and the others followed. Jessica gripped the reins and pressed her knees against the mare's sides as they galloped away from the train, leaving behind the shocked passengers and the life she had been heading toward. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful and terrifying in its vastness, and she realized she had no idea what she had just agreed to or where this impulsive decision would lead. They rode hard for the first hour, putting miles between themselves and the train before slowing to a more sustainable pace that would not exhaust the horses. The other men kept their distance, giving Benjamin and Jessica space to talk, though she noticed they never stopped scanning the horizon for pursuit. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Jessica was grateful for the bonnet she had kept with her, though it did little against the penetrating heat. "Tell me about Gregory Ashford," Jessica said once they had slowed enough to allow conversation. "You said he buried 2 wives. How do you know this?" Benjamin glanced at her, his expression grim beneath the shadow of his hat brim. "I made inquiries after receiving my mother's letter. Ashford's first wife died in a fall down the stairs of their Boston home. The second drowned in the Charles River, supposedly while taking an evening walk alone. Both deaths were ruled accidents, but both women were young, healthy, and had recently begun expressing unhappiness in their marriages. The second wife had actually written to her sister about seeking a divorce shortly before she died." A chill ran down Jessica's spine despite the heat. "And no one investigated?" "Ashford has money and influence, the kind that makes inconvenient questions disappear. He also has no children from either marriage, which is odd given that producing an heir was supposedly his reason for marrying both times." Benjamin's jaw tightened. "My mother's letter said that your mother had discovered these details through an old friend in Boston. She was trying to gather enough evidence to convince your father to break the arrangement, but she died before she could make him see reason." "My father sees only the money," Jessica said bitterly. "He has been like a stranger since the mine collapsed. I think losing everything broke something inside him." "That does not give him the right to sacrifice you to fix his mistakes." They rode in silence for a while, the steady rhythm of hoofbeats the only sound besides the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. Jessica studied Benjamin from the corner of her eye, trying to reconcile the decisive man who had stopped a train with the careful courtesy he showed her now. He sat his horse with the easy grace of someone who had spent most of his life in the saddle, and there was a quiet competence to everything he did that inspired confidence despite the bizarre circumstances. "You took a significant risk stopping that train," Jessica said eventually. "You and your friends could hang if you're caught." "Some things are worth the risk? Even for a stranger? For a promise to a dying woman?" Benjamin looked at her then, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. "My mother was the most important person in my world. When she died, I had nothing left of her but her last wishes. Keeping this promise is not just about saving you, though that matters. It is about honoring her, about proving that her death meant something, that her concern for an old friend's daughter was not in vain." The raw honesty in his words touched something deep in Jessica's chest. She understood that kind of loss, that desperate need to make meaning from grief. "I am sorry about your mother," she said softly. "And I am sorry mine put you in this position. But I am grateful. Whatever comes next, I am grateful you came for me." "You do not need to be grateful," Benjamin said. "You deserve better than what was being done to you. Every woman does." They reached Benjamin's ranch as the sun was setting, painting the Nevada sky in shades of orange and purple that took Jessica's breath away. The property was modest but well-maintained, consisting of a sturdy wooden house, a barn, a corral with a dozen horses, and several outbuildings scattered across land that rolled gently toward distant mountains. As they rode up the main path, Jessica could see vegetable gardens beside the house and laundry hanging on a line, evidence of a working household. A woman emerged from the house as they approached, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 50 years old, with gray-streaked brown hair pulled back in a practical bun and a face lined by sun and smiles. Her expression shifted from curiosity to understanding as she took in Jessica's travel-worn dress and uncertain posture. "You must be Margaret's girl," the woman said warmly, coming forward to help Jessica dismount. "I am Martha, Benjamin's aunt. I keep house here and help with the ranch. You look exhausted, dear. Let us get you inside and comfortable while the men see to the horses." Jessica found herself ushered into the house before she could formulate a response, swept along by Martha's gentle competence. The interior was simple but clean, with wooden floors and sturdy furniture that showed care in its upkeep. Martha led her to a small bedroom at the back of the house where a single bed covered in a patchwork quilt sat beneath a window overlooking the western hills. "This was my daughter's room before she married and moved to California," Martha explained. "She would be happy to know someone is using it. Benjamin said you might be staying with us for a time while things get sorted out, so please make yourself at home. I will bring your trunk in shortly, and there is a washroom just across the hall. Supper will be ready in about an hour." "Thank you," Jessica said, overwhelmed by the kindness. "I do not know what Benjamin told you about how I came to be here, but I want you to know I appreciate your hospitality." Martha patted her hand gently. "Benjamin told me everything, and I told him he was absolutely right to do what he did. No woman should be sold off like livestock, especially not to a man like that. You stay here as long as you need to and do not worry about anything except recovering from your ordeal." After Martha left, Jessica sat on the bed and tried to process everything that had happened in the span of a single day. This morning she had woken on a train heading toward an unwanted marriage, resigned to a fate she could not escape. Now she was in a stranger's home in Nevada, having been essentially kidnapped by a cowboy who claimed to be honoring a promise to his dead mother. It should have been terrifying, and part of her knew she should be frightened, or at least more cautious, but instead she felt something she had not experienced in months: hope. Supper that evening was a quiet affair around a large wooden table in the kitchen. Besides Benjamin and Martha, 2 other men joined them, both members of the group that had stopped the train. They were introduced as Tommy and Frank, ranch hands who worked for Benjamin and had volunteered to help with the rescue. They were polite to Jessica, but clearly uncomfortable with the social situation, eating quickly and excusing themselves to the bunkhouse as soon as possible. "They are good men," Benjamin said after they left. "A bit rough around the edges, but loyal and honest. I could not have pulled this off without them." "Will they face consequences for helping you?" Jessica asked, concerned despite having just met them. "Not if we are careful. No one got a good look at their faces, and the train company does not know where to start looking. As long as you do not want to press charges or report what happened, we should be safe." Jessica shook her head firmly. "I have no intention of reporting anything. As far as I am concerned, you saved my life today." Benjamin looked relieved, though he tried to hide it. After supper, Martha shooed them both out of the kitchen so she could clean up, suggesting they take a walk around the property before full darkness fell. Jessica accepted, curious to see more of the ranch and eager to talk further with Benjamin away from other ears. They walked in comfortable silence at first, Jessica admiring the way the last light caught the peaks of the distant mountains, while Benjamin pointed out various features of his property. He had owned the ranch for 5 years, he explained, building it up slowly from nearly nothing through hard work and careful management. He raised horses primarily, training them for sale to the Army and to wealthy buyers in California who valued his reputation for quality stock. "You built all this yourself?" Jessica asked, impressed by the scope of what she could see even in the fading light. "With help from Tommy and Frank and a few others over the years, it is not much compared to some of the big operations, but it is mine, and it is honest. That matters to me." They had reached the corral, where several horses stood contentedly munching hay. Benjamin leaned against the fence and Jessica joined him, watching the animals in the growing darkness. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the sounds of horses and the distant call of coyotes. "What will you do now?" Benjamin asked quietly. "I meant what I said on the train. You are free to stay here as long as you need, but you're also free to leave whenever you want. I am not trying to trap you or force you into anything." Jessica considered his question carefully. "Honestly, I do not know. I cannot go back to my father. Not after this. Even if I wanted to, Ashford will eventually figure out what happened and demand his money back. My father would probably try to force me onto the next train east just to salvage the arrangement. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I suppose I need to find a way to support myself. Are there opportunities for work in Elko? I can sew reasonably well, and I can read and write and do figures. There might be work in town, Benjamin said slowly, but I have another suggestion if you are willing to hear it. I am listening. I need help here on the ranch. Martha does her best, but she is getting older, and managing a household plus helping with ranch work is becoming too much for her. If you were willing to stay and help with cooking, cleaning, laundry, garden work, that sort of thing, I would pay you a fair wage plus room and board. It would give you time to figure out what you want to do next without having to rush into anything. Jessica turned to look at him, trying to read his expression in the dim light. You would trust me with that responsibility? You barely know me. My mother trusted yours, and your mother trusted me enough to write asking for help. That is good enough for me. Besides, he added with a slight smile, you have not tried to shoot me or steal my horses yet, which puts you ahead of some ranch hands I have hired. A surprised laugh escaped Jessica, the first genuine one she had managed in weeks. Well, when you put it that way, I suppose I am a stellar candidate. I accept your offer, Benjamin Hayes. I will work for you and earn my keep, and we will see what the future brings. They shook hands on it, his palm warm and rough against hers, and Jessica felt a flutter of something she could not quite name. Gratitude, certainly, and relief, but also something else. A spark of awareness that had nothing to do with rescue or obligation, and everything to do with the way his eyes caught the moonlight and the strength in his handshake. The days that followed fell into a comfortable routine. Jessica woke early each morning to help Martha prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, then spent her days managing the household while Benjamin and his men worked with the horses or maintained the property. She had not realized how much physical work went into running a ranch. The endless cycle of cooking, cleaning, washing, mending, gardening, and 1,000 other small tasks that kept everything functioning smoothly. Despite the hard work, Jessica found herself happier than she had been in months. There was a satisfaction in useful labor, in seeing the direct results of her efforts in clean laundry hung on the line and fresh bread on the supper table. Martha was patient in teaching her the things she did not know, and gradually Jessica began to feel competent and capable in ways she never had at her father's house, where servants had done most of the work, and she had been kept decorative rather than useful. Benjamin maintained a respectful distance, treating her with unfailing courtesy but never presuming on the situation or making her feel uncomfortable. Yet Jessica found herself increasingly aware of him, noticing the way he moved with quiet confidence, the gentle patience he showed with the horses, the occasional flash of dry humor in his conversation. She caught herself watching him more often than was probably appropriate, her eyes drawn to the play of muscles beneath his shirt when he worked, or the way he pushed his hair back from his forehead when he was concentrating. 3 weeks after her arrival, a letter arrived addressed to Jessica. Benjamin brought it to her after collecting the mail in Elko, his expression concerned. Jessica recognized her father's handwriting on the envelope and felt her stomach tighten with dread. Do you want privacy to read it? Benjamin asked. No, stay, please. She broke the seal and unfolded the single page, scanning her father's harsh words quickly. Her hands began to shake before she finished, and Benjamin gently took the letter from her, reading it himself. His jaw clenched as he worked through the contents. He wants you to return immediately and finish the journey to Boston, Benjamin said flatly. He says Ashford is threatening legal action for breach of contract and demanding either your presence or return of the advance funds. He says if you do not comply, you are no longer his daughter. Jessica blinked back tears, though whether from hurt or anger she could not say. Some small part of her had hoped her father might understand, might be relieved she had escaped whatever fate awaited her with Ashford. Instead, he saw only his ruined finances and his damaged pride. I should have expected no less from him, she said, her voice unsteady. What should I do? Nothing. Benjamin said firmly. You do nothing. Ashford cannot enforce a marriage contract, and your father has no legal right to force you back. You are of age and free to make your own choices. Let them bluster and threaten all they want. They cannot touch you here. But what if they come looking for me? What if they send lawmen or agents? Benjamin met her eyes with steady determination. Then they will deal with me. I will not let anyone drag you back into that situation, Jessica. I promise you that. His fierce protectiveness stirred something warm and confusing in her chest. Why do you care so much? She asked softly. Your promise to your mother is fulfilled. You rescued me from the train. You have gone far beyond what anyone could expect. Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, seeming to struggle with his words. At first it was about the promise, he admitted. But the more time I spend with you, the more I realize I'm not doing this out of obligation anymore. I am doing it because I want to. Because the thought of you in danger or unhappy makes me angry in a way I do not fully understand. You deserve better than what was planned for you, and if I can give you that, even just for a little while, then I will. Jessica felt her breath catch at the intensity in his voice. She had been trying to ignore the growing attraction she felt, telling herself it was just gratitude or the natural result of being in close quarters with a handsome man who had saved her. But looking at him now, seeing the honest emotion in his eyes, she could no longer pretend what she felt was simple or uncomplicated. Benjamin, she started, but he shook his head. You do not need to say anything. I know this situation is already complicated enough without me adding my own feelings into it. I just want you to know that you are safe here for as long as you want to stay, and I will do everything in my power to protect you from your father and Ashford and anyone else who tries to hurt you. Before she could respond, he turned and left the room, leaving her standing alone with her father's poisonous letter and a heart suddenly beating too fast for comfort. That night, Jessica lay awake in her small room, staring at the ceiling and trying to sort through her tangled emotions. Everything had happened so fast. Just a month ago, she had been resigned to a loveless marriage and a life of quiet desperation. Now she was living on a Nevada ranch, working for a man who had stopped a train to save her, feeling things she had no right to feel given the circumstances. She thought about Benjamin's words, about the promise he had made and the reasons behind it. She thought about the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention, a softness in his expression that made her pulse quicken. She thought about her own growing feelings, the way her day felt brighter when he was near, the way she found excuses to be where he was working just to be in his presence. This was not what she had expected when she took his hand on that train. She had thought he was offering her freedom from one trap, not realizing she might be willingly walking into something entirely different. Not a trap exactly, but something far more dangerous. The possibility of genuine feeling, of caring for someone in a way that could break her heart if it was not returned or if circumstances pulled them apart. The sound of footsteps outside her window made her sit up, heart racing. She moved to peer through the curtain and saw Benjamin walking toward the barn, unable to sleep just as she was. Without allowing herself to overthink it, Jessica pulled on her robe and slipped out of the house, following the path he had taken. She found him in the barn, standing beside the stall of his buckskin gelding and stroking the horse's nose with gentle hands. He turned when he heard her approach, surprise and something else flickering across his face. Jessica, is everything all right? I could not sleep, she admitted, moving to stand beside him. I keep thinking about my father's letter, and about what you said earlier, and about everything that has happened in the past month. My whole life has been turned upside down. Do you regret it? He asked quietly. Coming with me instead of continuing to Boston? No, she said immediately. Even with all the uncertainty and fear, I do not regret it for a second. Being here, working on the ranch, feeling useful and capable, it has been the happiest I have been in years. And that is because of you, Benjamin, because you cared enough about a stranger to keep a promise to your dying mother. You are not a stranger anymore, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You have not been a stranger for a while now." Jessica looked up at him, seeing in the dim lantern light the same conflicted emotions she felt reflected in his eyes. The air between them felt charged, heavy with things unsaid, and she knew if she stepped back now, they could return to their careful dance of propriety and distance. But she was tired of being careful, tired of letting others decide her fate. "What am I then?" she asked, taking a step closer. "If not a stranger?" Benjamin's breath hitched audibly. "You are someone I think about far more than I should, someone whose smile makes my entire day better, someone I would do anything to protect and keep safe." He raised his hand slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and gently cupped her cheek. "You are someone I am falling in love with, even though I know I probably should not be." Joy and relief flooded through Jessica in equal measure. "Why should you not be?" "Because you have been through so much already, because you deserve time to figure out what you want without another man making claims on your future, because I do not want you to feel obligated or grateful or anything except what is real." "Then let me tell you what is real," Jessica said, placing her hand over his where it rested against her cheek. "I am falling in love with you too, Benjamin Hayes, not because you rescued me, not because I am grateful, though I am, but because of who you are. Because you are kind and honest and strong, because you treat everyone with respect from your ranch hands to the horses you train, because when you look at me, I feel seen in a way I never have before. That is what is real." Benjamin made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a groan, and then he was pulling her close, wrapping his arms around her as though she was something precious and fragile. Jessica pressed her face against his chest, feeling his heart thunder beneath her cheek, and knew with absolute certainty that this was where she was meant to be. "I do not know how to court a woman properly," Benjamin murmured into her hair. "I have spent the last 5 years building this ranch and barely thinking about anything else. You deserve romance and proper courting, not just me stumbling through my feelings in a barn at midnight." Jessica pulled back enough to look up at him, smiling despite the tears she felt gathering. "I do not need romance, though I would not say no to it. I just need honesty and time to build something real together. Can you give me that?" "I can give you anything you want," he promised. And then he leaned down and kissed her, gentle and sweet and full of promise. The next few months unfolded like a dream Jessica had never dared to have. Benjamin courted her with a sincerity and thoughtfulness that made her heart ache in the best possible way. He picked wildflowers for her from the meadows beyond his property, presented them awkwardly but with such genuine pleasure that she found them more beautiful than any hothouse roses. He taught her to ride better, patient with her mistakes, and generous with his praise when she improved. He talked to her about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to expand his breeding program and maybe one day build a bigger house, and the way he said "we" instead of "I" made her pulse race with possibility. For her part, Jessica found herself opening up in ways she never had before. She told him about her childhood in Colombia, about watching her father change from a hopeful prospector to a bitter, desperate man. She talked about her mother's illness, about holding her hand as the consumption slowly stole her breath and life. She shared her fears about the future, about never being able to return home or reconcile with her father, and Benjamin listened without judgment, offering comfort without trying to fix things that could not be fixed. They fell into an easy partnership that extended beyond their growing romance. Benjamin valued her opinions on ranch matters, asking her input on everything from which horses showed the most promise to how they should arrange the new storage shed. Jessica discovered she had a good eye for horse flesh and a natural way with the animals that Benjamin praised sincerely. Together they worked to make the ranch more efficient and successful, their combined efforts yielding results that neither could have achieved alone. Martha watched their growing relationship with obvious approval, often conveniently finding reasons to leave them alone together or suggesting they take evening walks together. "Your mother would be so pleased," she told Jessica one day while they worked together in the garden. Margaret always wanted you to find someone who would treat you as an equal partner, not just as property or decoration. Benjamin is a good man, and he looks at you like you hung the moon." "I feel the same way about him," Jessica admitted, pulling weeds with perhaps more enthusiasm than necessary to hide her blush. "I never expected to feel this way about anyone, let alone so quickly. Sometimes it frightens me how much I care for him." "That is how you know it is real," Martha said wisely. "Love should be a little frightening, because it means you are brave enough to risk your heart, but Benjamin would never break it deliberately. He is too much like his father in that regard, too honorable and good." As autumn arrived and the Nevada landscape shifted to golds and russets, Benjamin asked Jessica to take a ride with him one Saturday afternoon. They rode out to a high meadow he had mentioned before, a place where you could see for miles in every direction, the mountains rising majestically in the distance and the whole vast sky stretching overhead. He helped her dismount and led her to a flat rock that made a natural bench overlooking the valley. "I've been thinking," Benjamin said, his tone nervous in a way she rarely heard from him, "about us and about the future and about what I want my life to look like." Jessica's heart began to race, sensing the importance of the moment. "And what do you see?" "I see you," he said simply, turning to take both her hands in his. "In every version of my future that matters, I see you, waking up beside you every morning, working alongside you during the day, falling asleep with you in my arms every night, building something together, not just a ranch, but a life, a family if you want that. Growing old together and facing whatever comes with the certainty that we are facing it as partners." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band, the metal catching the afternoon light. "This was my mother's," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She left it to me with instructions that I should give it to someone worthy of the Hayes name. Someone strong and brave and true. Jessica Thornton, you are all those things and more. Will you marry me? Not because you are grateful or because you have no other options, but because you want to build a life with me?" Tears streamed down Jessica's face as she nodded emphatically. "Yes, absolutely yes. I want nothing more than to marry you and build that life together. I love you, Benjamin Hayes, with everything I am." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. Then he was kissing her with a passion that took her breath away, and she was kissing him back with equal fervor, pouring all her love and joy and hope into the embrace. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and grinning, the sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors. "How soon can we be married?" Benjamin asked, making her laugh at his eagerness. "As soon as you want. I have no family to invite or plans to make. I just want to be your wife." "Then let us ride to Elko on Monday and talk to the preacher. I do not want to wait any longer than necessary." They married the following Saturday in a simple ceremony at the small church in Elko, with Martha and the ranch hands as witnesses. Jessica wore a dress Martha had helped her alter from one of her own, a simple blue cotton that matched her eyes and made Benjamin stare at her with such obvious admiration that the preacher had to clear his throat twice to get his attention back on the vows. When the preacher finally pronounced them husband and wife and told Benjamin he could kiss his bride, Benjamin swept her into his arms and kissed her so thoroughly that Tommy and Frank hooted with laughter, and even the preacher looked a bit scandalized. The wedding supper that night at the ranch was a joyous affair, with Martha having prepared a feast and several neighbors dropping by with congratulations and gifts. Jessica felt overwhelmed by the warmth and acceptance. These people welcoming her into their community despite knowing nothing of her background or the circumstances that had brought her to Nevada. When she mentioned this to Benjamin as they danced to music played by Tommy's surprisingly skilled fiddle, he smiled and kissed her forehead. "They can see what I see," he said, "someone genuine and good who makes me happy. That is all they need to know." Their wedding night was everything Jessica could have hoped for, tender and passionate, and full of whispered promises and gentle explorations. Benjamin was patient with her inexperience, taking time to make sure she felt safe and cherished, and Jessica discovered depths of feeling she had not known existed. Afterward, lying wrapped in his arms in what was now their shared bedroom, she felt a peace and contentment she had never experienced before. "Are you happy?" Benjamin asked softly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Happier than I ever imagined being," Jessica answered honestly. "Sometimes I cannot believe this is my life now. 4 months ago, I was on a train heading toward misery, and now I am here with you, married to the most wonderful man I have ever known. It feels like a dream." "If it is a dream, I never want to wake up," Benjamin said, pulling her closer. "I love you, Jessica Hayes." "I love you too," she whispered, and knew she would never tire of saying those words or hearing them in return. Winter came to Nevada with cold winds and occasional snow, but the ranch house stayed warm and cozy, filled with the sounds of daily life and work. Jessica continued to manage the household with Martha's help, though now she also took on more responsibilities in the actual ranch operations. She had a real talent with the horses, Benjamin discovered, particularly with the more skittish or difficult animals. Something about her calm, patient demeanor seemed to reach them in ways even his experienced handling could not always match. "You are a natural horsewoman," he told her one afternoon after watching her successfully gentle a mare that had been giving them trouble for weeks. "Have you ever thought about training them yourself, not just helping me?" Jessica looked up in surprise from where she was stroking the mare's neck. "Do you really think I could?" "I know you could. You have the patience and the instinct for it. We could make it official, advertise your services as a trainer specializing in difficult horses. There are always people willing to pay good money for someone who can turn a troubled animal into a reliable mount." The idea excited Jessica more than she had expected. To have her own role in the ranch beyond housekeeping, to be a true partner in the business as well as in marriage, felt like a validation of everything she had hoped for when she accepted Benjamin's proposal. "I would love that," she said, "if you truly think I am skilled enough." "I would not suggest it if I did not believe in you completely," Benjamin assured her, coming over to slip his arms around her waist from behind. "You are remarkable, Jessica Hayes, in more ways than you give yourself credit for." As winter turned to spring and then summer, their life together continued to deepen and grow. The ranch prospered under their combined management, with Benjamin's breeding program producing several highly sought-after foals and Jessica's training services bringing in additional income from grateful clients. They worked hard but also made time for joy, for evening rides through the countryside and lazy Sunday mornings spent in bed talking about everything and nothing. In late summer, Jessica began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Benjamin, nervous despite knowing he would be thrilled. She chose the evening after supper when they were sitting together on the porch watching the sunset to share her news. "Benjamin, I have something to tell you," she began, and he immediately turned to her with concern at her serious tone. "What is wrong? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right," she said, taking his hands in hers. "I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Benjamin simply stared at her, his expression cycling rapidly through shock, disbelief, and then pure, incandescent joy. Then he was laughing and pulling her into his arms, holding her carefully as though she might break, kissing her face repeatedly while he repeated, "We are having a baby. We are really having a baby." "Are you happy?" Jessica asked, though his reaction left little doubt. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Benjamin said, pulling back to look at her with shining eyes. "You have given me everything I never knew I needed, Jessica, a partner, a love, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." The months of Jessica's pregnancy were filled with preparation and anticipation. Benjamin became almost comically protective, fussing over her and trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work despite her protests that she was pregnant, not fragile. Martha was delighted to be gaining a grandchild of sorts and immediately began sewing tiny clothes and blankets. Even Tommy and Frank got into the spirit, building a beautiful cradle in their spare time as a gift. In early March, on a crisp morning in 1875, Jessica went into labor. The birth was long and difficult, testing her endurance and courage, but Benjamin never left her side, holding her hand and wiping her forehead and whispering encouragement through every contraction. When their son finally arrived, red-faced and squalling, Jessica saw tears streaming down Benjamin's face as the midwife placed the baby in his arms. "He is perfect," Benjamin whispered, staring at his son with wonder. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" They had discussed names endlessly over the preceding months, but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at her husband holding their child with such love and awe, Jessica knew exactly what felt right. "What about Michael, after your father?" Benjamin looked up at her with such gratitude and love that fresh tears spilled down his cheeks. "Michael Hayes, I love it. Thank you, Jessica, for him, for everything, for making my life complete." Little Michael proved to be a healthy, happy baby who quickly became the center of their world. Benjamin was a devoted father from the start, taking on diaper changes and midnight feedings with the same competence he brought to everything else. Jessica watched him with their son and fell in love with him all over again, seeing the gentleness and patience he showed with the tiny new life they had created together. As Michael grew from infant to toddler, life on the ranch continued to evolve. They expanded their operations, hiring more hands and purchasing adjacent property to increase their grazing land. Jessica's reputation as a horse trainer spread throughout Nevada and into neighboring territories, bringing clients from as far away as California and Utah. Benjamin's breeding program produced consistently excellent stock, and the Hayes Ranch became known as one of the best sources of quality horses in the region. 2 years after Michael's birth, Jessica gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Sarah, who arrived early one September morning much more quickly than their brother had. Benjamin was beside himself with joy at having daughters, and Jessica teased him about being outnumbered by women for the rest of his life. The twins were as different as could be, with Emma taking after Jessica's quieter, thoughtful nature, while Sarah showed Benjamin's bold, adventurous spirit from the very beginning. The years passed in a blur of work and love and the beautiful chaos of raising children. Michael grew into a serious boy who loved the horses and showed early signs of inheriting both his parents' skill with animals. The twins grew from toddlers into active young girls who kept everyone on their toes with their energy and curiosity. Through it all, Benjamin and Jessica's love for each other only deepened, weathering the challenges of ranch life and parenthood and emerging stronger each time. One evening, when Michael was 7 and the twins were 5, Jessica found Benjamin standing alone on the porch after the children had gone to bed, looking out at the land they had built their life on. She joined him, slipping under his arm and leaning against his solid warmth. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About how different my life could have been if my mother had not written that letter, if I had not stopped that train, if you had said no and stayed aboard." He tightened his arm around her. "Every day, I thank God you trusted me enough to take my hand and come with me." "I thank God you were brave enough to stop that train," Jessica countered. "And I thank your mother and mine for caring enough to try to save me from a terrible fate. But mostly I thank you, Benjamin, for being exactly who you are, for showing me what real love and partnership looks like, for giving me a life I never dreamed was possible." "We built it together," he said, "every bit of it, from that first day to now. That is what makes it so precious." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. From inside the house came the faint sound of Martha singing as she tidied the kitchen, and beyond that, the peaceful sounds of the ranch settling for the night. This was their life, built from a desperate rescue and a promise kept, grown into something more beautiful than either of them could have imagined. "Do you ever wonder what happened to Gregory Ashford?" Jessica asked, voicing a question that occasionally still crossed her mind. "Whether he ever came looking for me or just moved on to another victim?" "I heard he died 2 years ago," Benjamin said quietly. "Heart failure, according to the reports. He never married again after you failed to show up in Boston. Apparently, the scandal of being jilted by a mail-order bride damaged his reputation enough that no respectable family would trust him with their daughters anymore. Jessica absorbed this information with mixed feelings. She felt no satisfaction in anyone's death, but she could not help a sense of relief that Ashford would never threaten another young woman. "And my father? Have you heard anything about him?" Benjamin hesitated, then sighed. "He died last year. Drink, from what I understand. Martha heard about it through some old friends in Columbia. I did not tell you because I did not want to upset you while you were pregnant with the twins." Sadness washed through Jessica, not for the man her father had become, but for the man he once was, before desperation and greed had twisted him into someone unrecognizable. "I wish things could have been different with him. I wish he could have met his grandchildren." "I know," Benjamin said, kissing the top of her head, "but he made his choices just as you made yours. You chose love and life and partnership over money and security, and look what it brought you. 3 beautiful children, a successful ranch, and a husband who adores you. No regrets. Jessica, we have no room for regrets in this life we have built." She smiled at that, recognizing the truth in his words. They had both lost family and faced uncertainties, but what they had gained together far outweighed any losses. "No regrets," she agreed, "only gratitude and love and hope for the future." As the years continued to unfold, that future proved even brighter than they had dared to hope. Michael grew into a fine young man who took over more and more of the ranch operations, showing a natural leadership that made both his parents proud. The twins developed into accomplished horsewomen in their own rights, with Emma inheriting her mother's gift for training difficult animals, while Sarah showed a talent for breeding and bloodline management that rivaled her father's expertise. The Hayes Ranch expanded to become one of the most respected operations in Nevada, known not just for quality horses but for the integrity and fairness of its owners. Benjamin and Jessica became pillars of their community, known for their generosity and willingness to help neighbors in need. They never forgot where they had come from or how easily their lives could have gone differently, and that awareness informed every decision they made. When Michael turned 21, he married a sweet young woman named Catherine from a neighboring ranch, and within a year, Benjamin and Jessica became grandparents to a squalling baby boy named Benjamin Jr. Holding his grandson for the first time, Benjamin looked at Jessica with tears in his eyes. "Our mothers would be so proud," he said, "of everything we built, everything we became. Because of their friendship and their courage to act, we found each other and created all of this." "Then we should make sure our children know the story," Jessica said, watching Michael and Catherine coo over their newborn son. "So they understand the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult or dangerous. So they know that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is reach out your hand to someone who needs help." They did tell the story that night and many nights after to their children and eventually their grandchildren. They told about a desperate young woman on a train heading toward a terrible fate, about a cowboy who kept a promise to his dying mother, about a rescue that became the foundation for a great love and a greater legacy. The story became part of the family history, passed down through generations, a reminder that courage and compassion can change not just one life, but many. As they grew older together, Benjamin and Jessica never lost the sense of wonder and gratitude that had defined their relationship from the beginning. They worked side by side until their bodies no longer allowed it, then sat side by side on the porch, watching their children and grandchildren carry on the work they had started. They held hands like young lovers even as their hair turned silver and their movements slowed, still finding joy in each other's presence after decades of marriage. On a warm spring evening in 1901, when they had been married for 26 years and Jessica was approaching her 48th birthday, they sat together on that same porch where they had shared so many conversations over the years. Michael and his family lived in the main house now, having taken over the majority of the ranch operations, while Benjamin and Jessica occupied a smaller cottage on the property that Benjamin had built for them. The twins, both married with families of their own, visited regularly with their children, filling the ranch with noise and laughter. Can you believe it has been 26 years since we stood in that church in Elko and promised our lives to each other? Jessica mused, her head resting on Benjamin's shoulder. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together, Benjamin replied, his fingers laced with hers. Either way, I would not change a single moment. Well, except maybe I would have stopped that train sooner, given us more time together. Jessica laughed softly. We have had plenty of time, my love, and we have many more years ahead of us still. We are not that old. Old enough to be grandparents 5 times over, he teased. But you are right. God willing, we have many more sunsets to watch together. They fell into comfortable silence, watching the day fade into night. From the main house came the sounds of dinner being prepared and children playing, the everyday music of family life that had become the soundtrack to their existence. This was what they had built from that desperate gamble on a stopped train, from a promise kept and a hand extended in rescue. Not just a ranch or a business, but a legacy of love and loyalty and partnership that would continue long after they were gone. Benjamin, Jessica said softly, turning to look at him in the fading light. Thank you for stopping that train. Thank you for saving me and loving me and building this beautiful life with me. I cannot imagine what my existence would have been like if you had not been brave enough to keep your promise. He cupped her face gently, his touch as tender as it had been that first night in the barn when they admitted their feelings. You do not need to thank me, Jessica. You saved me just as much as I saved you. Before you, I was just existing, building a ranch, but not really building a life. You showed me what it means to have a true partner, to love someone completely and be loved in return. You gave me everything that matters: love, family, purpose, joy. If anyone should be grateful, it is me. Then let us just agree we are both blessed beyond measure, Jessica said, smiling through happy tears. And let us promise to never take a single day together for granted. That is a promise I can easily keep, Benjamin said, and sealed it with a kiss that was no less sweet for the thousands that had come before it. They sat together until full darkness fell, and the stars emerged in brilliant array across the Nevada sky, just as they had done countless times before and would do countless times again. 2 people who had found each other through courage and compassion, who had built something lasting and true from the most improbable beginnings, who had proven that sometimes the most important thing you can do is reach out your hand and trust someone else to take it. Their love story, born on a stopped train in the middle of the Utah desert, had bloomed into something neither could have predicted but both cherished with their whole hearts. And as they finally rose to head inside, arms around each other, supporting and cherishing each other, as they had always done, they carried with them the deep contentment of knowing they had lived their lives exactly as they were meant to be lived, together, in love, building something beautiful that would endure long after they were gone. The Hayes Ranch continued to thrive for generations, always known not just for excellent horses, but for the love story at its foundation. The tale of a cowboy who stopped a train and the woman brave enough to trust him with her life and heart. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy of all. Proof that true love, built on respect and partnership and genuine caring, could overcome any obstacle and create miracles that echoed through time.